First off, hi Ethan, great to see you. You are like the first conversation I've had all week. This was like the first week. I can't even speak right. Where having a newborn mixed with having an 18-month-old like actually brought me to the dark side. So.
For people listening, okay, a couple of things. First of all, Tim is wearing what can only be described as like the Emperor of the Dark Side hoodie. It's like a dark black hoodie, hood
it's
up.
Levi's, so
yeah, okay.
Style at least.
It is. It's stylish, but he's like definitely comfortable. We'll say that much. And we're starting at like 2:20, which is or 2:20, I guess 3:20 East Coast. We're starting a little late, and it's because of a few reasons, but one thing Tim said to me goes, dude, I need 5 minutes. I got to make some coffee or I'm not going to make it today. So what's going on, man? Things just the kids are handful this week or what?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that. My son still sleeps like a champ. My daughter's just different than my son was. Like my son, when he was a newborn, he would wake up to feed and then he would just pass back out. He's just like kind of a hamburger in that way. But my daughter is different where she's like, it's not on or off. You know, she does a whole bunch of, there were times where I would fall asleep like a minute and a half increments last night.
Oh, you know? That's insane.
So, it's all good, man. It's all good. But yeah, this was the first week where, you know, my wife and I were downstairs just chatting out back because it's a beautiful day here in Nashville. And we're sitting on the back porch, just kind of looking at each other like, are we alive? Like, is this real life?
It's like hallucination territory.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. Other than that, it's been a great week. Been killing it this week, man. Things are going really well, and I'm grateful. So what about you? Anything you need to get off your chest, or should I jump right into this bad boy?
No. Well, I'm keen to see what you brought, but you mentioned you were killing it. I wanted to say I noticed that you published the thing that you wrote about Jordan Peterson, which I think is the first time I've ever seen you mention the blank page on Twitter. Am I right about that? Or
yeah, that's the first time I ever put it out there. You are correct in that assessment. Yes.
Pretty rad, man. Pretty rad. So yeah, I noticed a couple of it was that you said it's bothering you?
It was bothering me. It was like something that I felt like I had to get off my chest.
Oh, the conversation the thing that you actually wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting, man. I read the whole thing. So, do you want to summarize it for people, or do you maybe not want to talk about it, or I don't know?
I'll talk about it. Sure. Cool. I've mentioned Jordan Peterson 2 or 3 times in this podcast, and I find him a fascinating guy because he's obsessed with communism, and I've always been kind of weirdly obsessed with communism. Also advocates for people being able to defend themselves with articulation and speech. And that's something that I've really had to embark upon in my life for other reasons that I've talked about in the show. But more than anything, years ago, there was a lecture that he gave. And the lecture was about the story Pinocchio and how in this story, we all take at face value this incredibly random concept of a wooden-headed marionette boy puppet that goes through this archetypical hero's journey and lands at the bottom of the ocean to rescue his father inside the belly of a whale. And like, even when you say it out loud, it's like, what kind of story is that? But we all watch that story and we just totally take it at face value. You know, like it makes perfect sense to us. And so in this lecture, Jordan Peterson's argument was that it makes sense to us because at a human level, what it's actually representing is us facing ourselves in like the deepest, darkest abyss that there is. And more or less like the worst place to look and the scariest thing is looking into like the abyss inside yourself. And that's what like the representation of your father is, you know, it's like the thing that you could become. And it was at a point in my life where I really needed to hear it because I had a challenge approaching me in my life right at that time, like that day, really. And so this podcast had a huge impact on me where into the belly of the whale, you know, what you want most will be found where you least want to look. And from that moment, it helped me a lot look directly at things that really, really frightened me. I mean, honestly, even when we talk about like focusing on the one thing that matters, and that whole thing with Stodzy was like, let's just have the courage to look at that thing that matters and like actually matters. That was part of that whole season of my life as well. Anyway, I highlight that to say that Jordan Peterson, for the most part, has been a real positive influence in my life. As such, there's been times where he's like a conundrum because he says such vile things about people sometimes. And so much of his message is about like uplifting others and about taking accountability for your own life and about like the power of an encouraging word. And he says these things like, wow, that's so powerful. And then in the next sentence, he'll like so vehemently like insult people or philosophies that he doesn't believe in. And so it finally clicked the other day. I saw this interview with him, whereas Piers Morgan, he's a British journalist. I guess he's kind of like, I think he's like a Labour Party journalist. I think that could be totally wrong. I'm pretty sure he is though. So it'd be like Anderson Cooper interviewing somebody like that. He started fucking crying again. And I'm like, what is with this dude always crying on camera? And then it just dawned on me, like the reason why he's so vehemently passionate about these ideas of taking personal accountability for yourself and about like some transgenderism type stuff and about individualism specifically is because he hasn't figured it out for himself. And it was like, oh shit, like duh, everybody is just a person. You know, everybody, no matter the facade and no matter the suits and no matter his like intellect and his ability to articulate arguments, like deep down, he's still just a fucking person. And the reason why he cares so much about it is because he hasn't figured it out for himself. And it just clicked. And I was like, damn it, you know what? Like, this is on my heart. I have to write it. And so I was up at 3 a.m. And what better time to write an article about about a Jordan Peterson moral dilemma than at 3:50 in the morning when I slept for an hour. And that's the story.
Best time to put complicated thoughts on paper.
Yeah.
I liked it, man. I read it, and I have a similar sort of fascination with his work. And the thing that I pulled out of that piece, I think, is how complex it is to be sort of a full, well-rounded person these days. Because it's almost like we demand, not that we demand this, but you know, when you're in the public spotlight, such a tiny part of you is actually out there.
Yes.
And it just gets amplified and amplified, especially these days when a single thing that you do can go viral and be like more popular than anything else you've ever created.
And that's what everybody knows you by.
It's kind of how everybody knows you. Yeah. And it's really interesting to think about how, what a limited view of a person that ultimately creates and how those views can just kind of crack open as soon as you are exposed to like more of somebody. I also think a lot about just, you know, I think one of the things with him in particular that intrigues me is that he has been fighting really hard for a lot of years. And whether you agree with his stances or not, I think one thing that's probably objectively true or difficult to debate would be that he's been at like the center of controversy for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard, man.
Very stressful.
And who knows how much of a challenge that's been for his family or something like that. I think what it makes me think of is almost like PTSD, dude. It's like, how long can you fight a battle in public before there's almost like no coming back from it, you know? Like,
I think he likes it.
Well, you said that too. I thought that was an interesting line because I think you said something along the lines of like he's gotten addicted to the controversy.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of an interesting assertion. And I could imagine that happening to somebody, right? Especially once you know that it works too. But there's a lot to it, I think. I think part of it is probably that his social medias, you know, probably also partially managed. So I know this. I have friends who are big, like, you know, they've got big followings and they run some of their social media, but a lot of it is like interns and stuff. And so sometimes something goes out the door and you have to have a conversation with an intern and be like, yo, this was not on brand. We're going to fucking deal with it because it's out there and it's like, it's doing work now. But, you know, sometimes I think one thing that's kind of hidden from people's view is the fact that some of the things people say are not necessarily being said by them. They're being said by interns who are trying to match a voice, trying to match a thing, but also trying to like execute on goals, like growth goals and stuff like that.
Sure.
In the case of the tweet that you mentioned, I saw the interview that he did, the follow-up interview. So he was using language that suggested that he wrote that one personally.
He wrote it. Yeah.
Yeah. But just in general, I think it's so complex when you look at these super popular people. It's hard to put them in a box, man.
Yes. And it's a constant reminder to myself. I had a girlfriend in Florida years ago who was training to be a clinical psychologist, and she had a mentor. And I remember one time she really criticized me of black and white thinking, because part of like my recovery is abstinence, and it's easier for me to just be like, I'm never eating sugar again, than it is to figure out like it's okay to have a couple bites of ice cream at Thanksgiving. Like I struggle with that. And so I think one of my defense mechanisms has been like real just black and white thinking, like I'm all in or I'm not at all, which makes me all in, except just from like a negative perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And during this conversation, she said that her mentor told her that the world is gray. And that always really stuck with me, because even when I find people or have ideas that really speak to me, there's just as many conflicting ideas that are also just as beautiful and are also true,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, geez, like now we're getting into social media and society as a whole with all the things that are going on right now. But I think I have done a good job, I hope, of constantly reminding myself that it's okay to take things and blend them together in an overall arching understanding of what it means to be a good person. And like you can believe two opposing ideas at the same time, and both of them can be true. And like you can be okay with that, So that's why,
it's
why that stuck with me.
Well, it's really interesting too. It's tricky territory because you sort of dance this line between being like a well-integrated person and a hypocrite, right? Because,
Exactly.
I think we've said this line on the podcast before, like one of the signs of intelligence is the ability to hold two conflicting truths sort of in your mind or in your heart at the same time. And I believe that. I certainly believe that. Then there's a version of that where it's like it's almost, there's like a twisted version of that wherein somebody claims to hold two conflicting truths, but it's almost like they hold neither, right? Because it's just convenient to use one truth at one time and another at another. So it's an interesting sort of area to reflect on. I struggle with it though, man. So here's the thing. I grew up moving all over the place, and later in my life, which I guess I'm still pretty early in my life. That's dumb to say that. But like when I was in my 20s, I finally heard this term, third culture kid. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay, I had never heard of it either until then. But the idea is basically these are like kids who kind of grow up in a culture or a place that's not where they were born and it's not where their parents were born. And so they're exposed to, different cultures. And most of my growing up was done in the U.S., so it's not like I was exposed to different languages and stuff. But we moved around a lot. We used to move around like every couple of years at the most, and at one point, it was every few months. So I ended up developing sort of this personality, which turns out to match up perfectly with this sort of like psychological profile, what they call a third culture kid. And people can look this up on Wikipedia if they want to. If you grew up moving around a lot and you didn't hear this term, you'll probably read the Wikipedia page and it'll really resonate. But the idea is like third culture kids, there's pluses and minuses to being able to do this thing where you see both sides of the equation. So third culture kids tend to be a little better at it, right? Like because you have experienced different cultures or different like ways of living. It's easier for you to hear two people who disagree with each other and be like, well, I can see why this guy's right and I can see why that guy's right, and there is no black and white in this situation. That tends to come easier. But what's harder then is like assimilating into any particular place and really feeling like a part of it, because the entire time you got one foot out the door. You're sort of like, I can see why this worldview makes sense, and I could also walk away from it tomorrow and like be totally fine. So one of the reasons that I like our thing is because I feel like you actually are better at having like those sort of like black and, not that you hold them strongly, but you're better at coming out and saying the black and white thing, where I'll be like, I kind of default to the shades of gray first. And for me, it's refreshing to find somebody who's just like, nah, this guy's an asshole, dude. Like, he's just being a dick. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I can kind of see this. I can kind of see that. So I don't know. I think you need both sides. Like, you need to be able to understand that the world exists in shades of gray, and sometimes you just got to draw a line in the sand and be like, no. Was that scene from Family Guy? It was like, you're being as stubborn as a mule. Did you ever see that?
No, but I can totally picture it. It's just like, no, I'm not.
Well, it's one of these cutaways, and it's a mule sitting on a couch with some guy, and the guy's like, and the mule's just like, no, Kevin Bacon wasn't in Footloose. No, he wasn't. The guy's like, yes, he was. What are you talking about? Of course he was. No. Anyways.
Yeah.
I digress.
Well, no, that's cool. That's a really cool place for us to start the conversation off with. I very rarely share that blog, and I write in it basically every day. But
I noticed you got sponsors over there.
Yeah, it's been cool.
How's that going?
Great. Yeah, dude, you inspired me. I'm really not lying. This free sponsorship, entry level front end product into a back end high dollar product. This is my move now, especially for Tim Stodds. The blank page is just, it's cool, and enjoying it, especially enjoying the experiment of, as people have approached me to sponsor Tim Stodds as a newsletter, I've thrown it out there. I'm like, hey, if you want, I got this other one too. I write it every day. It goes out 5 days a week. It's got about 1,200 members, about 400 people read it every day. I'll give you a link at the bottom of it. And so the two people, I'm 2 for 2 right now. The 2 sponsorships, one of them actually is the topic of what I want to tell you about today, who approached me to sponsor my newsletter, were also just like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And I'm like, sure. So I'm all about it.
That's cool. Awesome. Real quick, before we get into that, I want to just touch on 1 or 2 other things that you said early in the Jordan Peterson thing. I think these are kind of interesting. So you mentioned this thing about looking into the abyss, and I love that sort of mental framework or reminder that often you're going to find the answers to your problems by like looking at whatever it is you fear most. Yes. I think it was Carl Jung, who, and I haven't read his stuff, but a friend of mine has read his stuff and mentioned this is why we fear the ocean so much. Or at least that was like Jung's theory, is that the unknowable depth of the ocean reminds us of like our own unknowable depth, which that imagery has always stuck with me. But then the other thing is like this whole concept, there's a part of me, I find this to be very important, especially now, because we live in such complex times. And I've been paying like really close attention to the whole conflict over in Ukraine. Russia, Ukraine, what's going on over there? Yeah, everybody is. But like I follow it really closely. I watch it. There's like a whole bunch of analysts that I watch their stuff every single day. I read their newsletters. Like for whatever reason.
Peter Zayan.
Yeah. End
so
of globalization.
Smart.
It's very interesting stuff.
I know, and he knows like every population data of every tiny little town.
Yeah,
I've been following him for a while. He's my favorite.
Yeah, he's really interesting. He's a very good speaker too. He's like very captivating on stage. He's a fantastic performer in addition to being extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about all these guys is that I'm also very aware of the fact that they, for the most part, like agree with me I agree with them, and listening to their stuff makes me feel good, right? Because like Peter, what is it? Zayan? How do you pronounce it? Zayan?
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
For people listening, if you haven't run into him, he's a really interesting thinker, but he's very like pro-America. His shtick is sort of like that we are entering the end of globalization, right? The supply chain issues are basically going to be an issue, and I don't want to oversimplify his stance, but like his new book, I think it's called The End of Globalization or something like that.
It's called The End of the World is Only the Beginning.
Okay.
Great title, by the way.
It's a great title.
Yeah.
But that's basically the idea, right? Which is like we're exiting this era of globalized industry, and it's going to be replaced by something that's much more localized, and that's going to hurt pretty much everybody except for America, which is like comforting if you're in America.
Yeah.
But I'm very aware of the fact that I'm like, okay, well, you're listening to people whose opinion helps to alleviate some form of stress. Like, oh yeah, these are very stressful times, but don't worry, you're safe because you're in America. Or like, oh, these are very stressful times, but don't worry, Russia cannot win this war for these reasons. X, Y, and Z. The list goes on and on and on. And I don't want to make this political, so let me just get to the point. What I'm trying to do is balance those, or like try to flip the script and like flip the thinking and look for where our own mistakes are being made in the same way that we claim other people are making mistakes. So I'll give you a very specific example. When I watch coverage of of like the Russian mobilization, right? As an American and somebody who's like subject to all of our propaganda, I look at that and I'm like, why are they doing this? Right? Why do they think they can win this, first of all? And why do it in the first place? And, the answers to that are complex. But the big thing that like stands out to me is like just from a purely economical standpoint, it doesn't seem like this war is winnable from Russia's side. And so then what I have to do is I have to ask myself, okay, fine, but like flip the script. Where are we making the exact same mistake? So what things are we doing? What are we blinded to that's like leading us to act in a certain way, maybe related to this conflict, maybe something else entirely? It's like, what beliefs do we hold that are forcing us to act a certain way that is like self-delusional? I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't have answers for that yet, but that comes from the same place that you're talking about, which is like, what is our abyss, right? What is the thing that we're ignoring that will ultimately be our downfall because we're not willing to look at it? I want to be able to identify those things, look at them, and then tackle them. There's not much you can do on a national level for any individual person, right?
No, but I know what you're saying.
The same thing.
The concept in general.
Yeah, the same thing plays out on a personal level. It happens on a business level. It's like, what is the thing that you're not willing to look at that will be your downfall if you don't look at it? And for whatever reason, the conflict in Russia is like one of the more, the conflict in Ukraine. Let's be clear about that. But it's one of the more pertinent examples of that for me right now. But I think your point is universal in that it plays out in a lot of different domains.
Certainly is. In the article, I said it's probably the most impactful thing I've learned in the last 5 years, because it gave me the courage to be driving down the street in my own head and be able to recognize all of the ways that I protect myself with my thinking. And the world is not safe. So you're better off just acknowledging that you're alone and in danger so that you can do something about it, than to pretend like, bears can't fucking climb trees and like you're going to be safe up there,
Yeah, man. I don't know. I wonder if like one day we'll have like AI doubles or something like that. Because it's like, well, how could you possibly break this information to yourself too? It's a very hard wall to break through because you're always subject to your own blind spots, and then anything that doesn't come from that is going to come from somebody else, which means you're, I don't know, you're going to filter that. You're going to put that through your own filter. But now with AI.
Yeah, it is certainly an endless journey.
All right. Maybe enough philosophizing. What do you got? What do you got for me here?
Hey, I love that chat, man. I think this is some of the stuff that we've talked about for a long time, just seeing where our podcast takes us. So for everybody that is here for the writing and the business, we are here for it as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me make sure I don't have any like client information on my screen. Yeah, we're good. So you brought up the sponsorship. For the record, I'm not getting paid to show this right now, but you mentioned AI, and so this is another perfect segue. I don't have a whole lot to say about this particular new product other than it excites me and scares me at the same time. And I'll tell you why.
Hold on. We'll say what it is first. So
yeah, exactly. It's called Growth Bar, growthbarseo.com. The product it's basically GPT-3, but they've created a really user-friendly UX, user interface that makes it so that you can easily take content, put it into a field, give the AI a couple of cues, and then the AI can spit out content for you. And I have been, and I still am a believer that this won't replace writing. And I'll tell you why. Because if we ever get to the point where every SEO in the world has one of these tools, and every one of these tools is basically gaming the algorithm, then that means that every one of these tools is going to be able to be an exact match for what the algorithm wants. And when that happens, then what is there? You know, so like even if the whole entire thing becomes super AI generated, there's still going to be some kind of forced differentiating factor. And that is always going to be what we talked about before with like, you know, when art can be commoditized, the only thing left is the idea or the representation or the story behind it. And so that's my thought process on why AI won't take over the world for writers, at least not in my lifetime. But we tested it. We tested this out, and we tested it out on a very specific, it's right here, a very specific client that I have. This is a very small client. It's not a Stodzy client. It's just a personal consulting client that I took on. It's a woman. She lives in Florida, and her company is called Boo Boo Balls. Like you're a little kid and you got a boo boo. That's what it's about. And they're these tiny little keychain ice packs, and they're cute and they're quaint, and it's a great business. You know, she just got like this really cool thing going. And so what we did is we looked at this website and we thought to ourselves, how in the hell are we going to SEO such a weird, obscure product that not a lot of people are probably searching for? And so when we did a little bit of research, we discovered that, hey, people actually do search for ice pack keychains was one of them. Or people, yeah, I mean, not a lot, but yeah, they do. Or people search for like, one of the products she sells is little like zip packages to put Band-Aids in, you know? So it's like a cute little package that doesn't look so plasticky and tacky if you bring it with you to the playground, you know? Okay. And so, you know, I can even just show you. Boo Boo Ball USA for the people not watching the video. And we use this tool, Growth Bar SEO. And we came up with some benchmarks for the template of content for the products. We didn't do it on anything else, just the products. So she sells Boo Boo kits. She calls them keychains, ice packs, refill kits, tiny, quaint little products, right? And we fucking ramped this thing on all of the product pages, and we increased the traffic by 40% overnight. And we basically doubled the weekly revenue from SEO specifically. Yeah. So most of the revenue comes from social media.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what specifically? So you tested this SEO AI writing thing. Show me what it actually wrote, though.
It wrote all this. It wrote the product pages. I wrote all of them.
Can you click on it so that I can actually see what that is, though? Okay. Yeah. All right. Hold on. Let me read this out loud a little bit for people real quick. So if you scroll up, who says being a baseball fan has to be about sitting? Wait, just so I'm clear, it wrote all this? Or like, did it write this and then you guys refined it?
No, we gave it a baseline. So basically, you have to give it instructions.
Okay. And is that just a prompt, or did you actually feed it like?
No, it's like a prompt, dude. I'd say we spent 40 minutes on the instructions.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to read it out loud. It says, who says being a baseball fan has to be all about sitting in the stands and eating peanuts? This baseball keychain with a kid's first aid kit is the perfect accessory for any diehard baseball fan.
You put these keywords in there, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, you say add these keywords.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Not only does it show your love for the game, but it also comes in handy in case of any minor injuries. Okay, I'm going to keep going. This, and it goes on and on. So there's about a page of content here, including some like bulleted, let's see, our baseball keychain comes with a secret kid's first aid kit. So it's got kind of the bullets of like what's included in the kit. It's got, why should you get this baseball keychain? And there's 3 bullets. It says this baseball keychain is also great for storing small necessities like hair accessories, small medicine, money, cards, and secret stuff inside. Perfect for those little
accidents. You can see the robot right there. That secret stuff. Yeah.
Okay, this is good. I mean, this is like good copywriting. You guys didn't refine this at all? I would imagine you would have had to have touched up a little bit. Come on.
Nope.
Okay. And then specifications. I'm assuming you guys feed that. You have to have fed that in, right? That's okay. That's the thing. And just 4x5, ages 3 and up, polyester, hand wash only. Okay, man. Well, there goes my job.
Wild, right?
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. I'm actually glad you brought this up. First of all, this is so cool. So you said, how quickly did the rankings go up? You said overnight? Or was it?
Overnight is a speculative term in SEO. This is the difference in a week.
Okay.
So there was
Wow.
0 SEO traffic when we took on the account,
Yep.
and we took on the account in the beginning of August. So this only shows the last 28 days. And for people not watching the video, there's 2 lines on this graph. One of them is kind of like a dotted line, which is the historical data, and then one of them is a solid line, which is this week's data. So you can see in the historical data that the first quarter of the line just floats on the bottom because there was no SEO traffic at all. And then in the beginning of September, it popped up. That's when we did it. And so since then, it's got a 36% increase even since the beginning of September. Granted, a lot of that is from the first couple of days of the month because remember the previous month had 0 traffic. So it's plateaued a bit, but I mean, dude, it doubled the revenue from the SEO perspective.
That's
Not
awesome.
from everything, but this is what we're looking at is a screenshot from Google Analytics. And so we got the tracking and Google Analytics so we can track the revenue that came specifically from search.
Can we look at the product page one more time? Okay. This was a really cool topic to bring up today for a few reasons. This is timely. Have you been keeping up with the news about, there's other AI. This is a big week for AI generated content. So DALL-E 2.
Yeah.
DALL-E 2. Yeah, that went public yesterday. So now anybody can use it. I've been playing with that. That's a lot of fun. And then on the same day, Meta announced their tool. Did you see this? The video creation engine?
No.
Basically the same thing. They basically just one-upped OpenAI because they said, "Oh yeah, like AI generated
still
images
photos
are
for losers."
Yeah. How about a video? And they're like the video examples like unicorns running on a beach or something like that. It's wild. So I've been playing with DALL-E 2. And this is a whole topic that I track pretty closely because it's obviously directly in line with my job. And I think a lot of people are. What's that?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Cool. So here's my opinion. I think this is a net positive for the creative industry. And we'll have to hash this out live here because you're talking writing. I'm talking images. Those are similar but different enough that this might be different depending on the industry you're talking about. But for images, this was my experience. So I started playing with DALL-E 2, which for people who don't know, it's an AI engine. You type in a prompt and the computer will just invent an image based on like what you want. And I use it for a bunch of stuff. So give me a second. I'm going to pull up my account and I'll show you here. My experience, I came away with like 3 insights and I'll share my screen when it comes up. The first was, I don't think DALL-E 2 is going to be an issue for professional creators. Not really. And there's a few reasons for it. First, it's still not perfect. So when you type in certain prompts, like graphically, it has a hard time with faces. It has a hard time with hands. It has a hard time with little details.
Yeah.
So if I'm someone who is running a business and like I need professional illustration, I can't just kind of wing it on faces and hands and stuff like that, right? So what does that mean? It means if I'm actually somebody who's already paying for illustration, I'm not going to stop paying for it and start using DALL-E. So I don't think DALL-E is going to pull people out of the industry. Instead, I think it's going to be the reverse. I think what it has done is opened up a whole lot of creative horsepower for people who couldn't afford professional illustration beforehand and weren't even thinking about it. Now you can go do this. You can play with it a little bit. And I think what's going to end up happening is people are going to get pretty close to what they want. Yeah. Some of them are just going to use those images. And then I think it's going to be more of an on-ramp for creativity where they're going to go, you know what, this is really close to what we want. Now we just need to find a person who can take this over the finish line. So I think, at least for now, this may change in time, but for now, I think it's going to be a net positive for creators. Okay, I got it up. So let me just share my screen real quick. The way this works is like you literally just type in whatever you want. And scrolling through my screen for people who are listening here, I got Ben Franklin wearing aviators. I've got some science stuff, which I'll explain in a second. Got some paintings of rabbits. Each one of these has like a little bit of a story behind it, but the one that I want to focus on is this one, like this set of images, which is a whole bunch of images of like they look like bees doing science experiments. So we wrote this article at Trends about mead, which is wine made out of honey.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be fun to insert some sort of dolly generated illustration for that story. And so I started prompting this thing and just like trying to come up with something cool related to science and bees and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to scroll through this. I had a couple of different prompts. I said a bee mad scientist mixing sparkling chemicals in wine bottles while honey drips down the walls in the background. What I was trying to get was like, I wanted a bee in the hive. Like, and there's like a mad scientist, like, making stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm flipping through it for people listening here. They can see there's like a whole bunch of different styles. That's wrong direction. And it came up with some pretty cool shit. Like it's pretty much dead on. I'm seeing a lot of scientists that look like bees. Then there's some stuff where, okay, I said there were 3 takeaways. The first is it's not perfect, right?
Yeah.
So the second is related to the prompting. There's a definite skill involved in prompting these things.
Certainly.
I want to hear.
There's a skill involved with giving. There's a couple of them. Like, so growth bars, the one that we use is another one called Jasper. There's a skill in creating the prompt.
Yep. And so to me, what that means is like, okay, well, maybe illustrators, sure, maybe you're not going to work with an illustrator quite the same way, but it just becomes more of a consultative role where it's like, okay, well, what are you trying to get at? Yeah, okay, the skill will then be prompting the AI, and that's what you'll pay for. So there's still an opportunity there as a creative. You just need to learn these tools so that you're the person people pay to create results faster. Because a lot of people are going to come in here as these get more complex. You're not going to have the time to come up to speed on how to use an AI engine to create creative, especially not for one-off projects. Agencies will in-house that talent for sure. But individual companies, it's similar to being like, well, why don't you just learn how to use Adobe? Yeah, Adobe replaced like an entire studio worth of creatives if you know how to use it. But, it didn't like do away with the creative industry. So there's skill in prompting it. It's not perfect visually. Also, I've played with the writing version. Like I've played with GPT-3, and there's a situation there where like it can't really handle long content yet. So I think long form is still pretty safe. Did you guys experiment with that at all? I know you said those product pages about 400 words. So that's a pretty short piece of content. Yeah. Did you go any longer?
No, we didn't go any longer. We didn't need to. They're just product pages. If you would allow me to, I have a little bit of a rabbit hole to go down with artificial intelligence because I think I actually have the perfect example of what it will be able to do and where it will fall short. So there's a computer game that I don't play anymore because I'm a super nerd and I was getting really bad wrist pain. And so I had to stop playing it. But the game's called StarCraft. And it's a strategy game. You start with the base and you got to kill your opponent, basically. It's super high level because you have to crunch a lot of decisions in your head and make real-time decisions. That's why it's called an RTS, real-time strategy game. And some people have called it 3D chess. And here's the difference. There's AIs, very good AIs with StarCraft, and there are unbeatable AIs with chess. And it's to the point where even the best chess players in the world know that you'll never be able to beat a high-level AI at chess because with chess, there is such thing as a perfect move every time. But with something like StarCraft, there's not such thing as the perfect move. And I'll give you an example. If you want to beat an AI in StarCraft, and I know a lot of people don't know the game, so I'm just making it really simple examples. Like you can build buildings and stuff, and you build it all in real time. So you can build a building and just start building it, and the AI isn't smart enough to know when to shoot the building and when to shoot the enemy unit, the other thing that's shooting at you. Because sometimes it might make more sense to shoot the building, and sometimes it might make more sense to shoot the enemy unit. And so there's really cool tournaments about who can make AIs, and sometimes the AIs fight each other, and it's pretty interesting from the computer programming standpoint. But the point I'm getting at isn't about video games. The point I'm getting at is that for me, that always seemed like kind of a clear distinction where it's like, if there is a perfect decision to make, then an AI, I think, is going to be heavily, heavily relied upon. But if there is a if there is a decision to make where even the word perfect is the wrong word, where there's a decision to make that is some kind of combination between nuance and probability, it's just going to be so hard for an AI to figure that out, because even if it makes the statistically most probable choice every single time, the law of big numbers, there's like a bunch of different laws that for whatever reason will always create anomalies. And so those anomalies are continuously going to break the assuredness that AI can bring to the creative agency, right? Because you typed in, I'm looking back at the picture, a bumblebee laughing scientist mixing sparkling chemicals in wine bottles, digital art. When I hear that, I think the laughing scientist is a bumblebee. Mm-hmm. But what did it create? It created a laughing scientist and a bumblebee, right? And so, like, there's no such thing as a perfect choice. And I think that's always going to be the differentiating factor between the symbiotic relationship of human intellect and masterful execution of artificial intelligence.
I totally agree. I think that was well said. And it's striking me that there's a component of this that actually ties in with the earlier part of this conversation, which is that, one of the reasons AI is so good in certain circumstances is because of that ability to quote unquote look in that darkness, right? Yeah. Like AI is completely cold, emotionless. Yeah. And so it will just observe what worked over and over and over and over, like what actually worked, what didn't work. And it gets closer and closer and closer. And humans aren't as good as that. So humans will always have some level of like emotion inside the decision, which is why there's always that unpredictability. But to your point, it makes it very difficult for AI to ever perform 100% in a situation where there's a human interacting on the other side, because of that unpredictability. Because and I have not seen the stats. I'd actually be very interested to know. I've heard anecdotally that so professional chess players play each other, and those games go very smoothly for the reason that you gave, which is that there basically are right and wrong moves in chess, and the pros all know them. So you make a move, and then you can be pretty sure of what your opponent's going to do because there's only a certain number of options. But I've heard from some people who are really good at chess that it's actually very hard to play beginners because they don't make the right moves.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean a beginner is going to accidentally beat somebody who's great at chess, but it throws them off their wave, And I wonder if that same thing accelerates all the way up the chain to AI, where it's AI will be great in these situations, or potentially even playing other AIs, right? But as soon as you introduce humans into the equation, you just have a level of unpredictability that's never going to be completely overcome by pattern recognition, because pattern recognition alone can't account for every single outlier, and that's the stake. Come very, very, very close. But for people listening, the image that we're looking at right now, interestingly, there is a bumblebee in the image, right? Mm-hmm. But if you look close, this man is also half bumblebee. He's got wings. He's got
wings. You're right.
His arms are yellow and black. And then what I said earlier, look at his hands. They're one looks kind of like a hand. The other one almost looks like a heart. And it's this is cool. This is a cool piece of art, but it's not perfect. And so if I'm going to use this as a business owner, I'm going to use DALL-E to get this close. And then I'm going to go talk to a human and be like, okay, let's fix his hand. And I'd actually rather have my brand colors in his beard. Yes. And you're not going to waste all that time trying to get the computer to do this perfectly. You're going to get as close as you possibly can, and then you're going to get a person to do the rest, at least for now. So I'm on board with a lot of this AI content stuff. I don't think it's a threat to creators in the same way. Here's what it is a threat to. Here's what it's a threat to. It's a threat to anybody who's not great at their job, right? If you're relying on the fact that people find your job complicated, if you can artificially make your job seem more complex than it is, and that's how you get your money, you're screwed. Because, computers are just going to blow all that out of the water. But I don't think people listening to this are in that situation for the most part. I think people listening to this are, they're in the business of offering a service that is actually difficult to do. And all this has done is made it easier. I think it's going to expand the client pool. And there's something else that I wanted to talk about to this too, which is which I didn't expect. which is as soon as I started playing with this, dude, it made me want to be better at art.
Really?
Yeah, because there's something that's so intriguing about you type something in, like whatever comes out of your head, you just type it in and you hit create, and you just see what the computer makes, and that's cool. But while I was going through that, I was like, man, I wish somebody could just be like, you know what we want? We want like a mad scientist bee type thing, and be like, and I could just sketch that out and be like, oh, like this, right? No, maybe that, but like a little bit darker, or like, oh, maybe that, but like more steampunk style. It made me want to be better at art, and so what I was thinking was, I really think this is the kind of thing. I think what's going to happen is a lot of people who don't consider themselves to be creative, whether that's writing, video, images, whatever, I think they're going to start using these things, and it's going to be an on-ramp for human creativity. I don't think it's a replacement for it.
I 100% agree. Did you ever read the book Peak by Anders? What the hell's his name? Erickson, maybe? Anders Erickson?
I don't think so.
It was really fascinating. And I didn't finish the whole thing. It was one of those books that could have been a long essay, but it was great. And the guy was a doctor who studied memory and studied the peaks of human performance. And when it comes to memory, humans' ability to memorize became increasingly better, I guess. Like humans could start memorizing hundreds and hundreds of digits once they started working with computers. And so I think that what we're going to see is computers are only going to stretch the limit of what we're capable of.
You know, I didn't expect, when we were talking about the Jordan Peterson thing, I didn't expect this to carry over to so many different areas of this conversation, but I really think it does, because there's another aspect of this. We were talking about that ability to look into the abyss, or like look at what you fear the most.
Yeah.
I think that's so crucial for staying relevant as a creator too. I'm thinking about this.
Yeah, because people get like romantic with the way that it worked, with the way that it used to be.
Exactly.
That was actually another point of Peak, where 70-year-old doctors that have a lot of experience are far less effective at treating medicine as like the 24-year-old intern, because the 70-year-old doctor I've seen it all. There's nothing you can surprise me with. And they get hooked on the way that, medicine is supposed to be. Whereas an intern is, but maybe the expression is like piss and vinegar, right? Where they want to know all the new stuff. They want to really, really push themselves. And so I think you're totally right. It's a forced learned skill. You have to be willing to learn it to continuously, not just improve, but stretch your ideas of what works and what doesn't work.
You're making me think too, there's an important aspect of this that is, it's almost like embracing both the old and the new. And here's why. Because what I'm learning, I'm at a weird age right now, just 32. So for the first time, I'm kind of in this weird age where nobody cares about my generation anymore, right? Like for years, everyone was talking about millennials. Millennials this, millennials that, millennials are the worst.
Now they
just
need us.
Yeah, and it's like now it's like nobody cares. Now it's all Gen Z this, Gen Z that. And so what I noticed for the first time in my life is a whole bunch of like Gen Z people coming up, and they've got all these new ideas about like what's right, what's wrong, the way things should be done. And some of them are interesting. Some of them, though, I know are a mistake. And what I'm seeing is that process of a generation thinking that they have the right answer and then realizing over time, oh, wait, no, actually, they used to do this differently, and the old way is better for these reasons, right? Like I'm watching another generation go through that. And I think every generation goes through that. And so you're making me think there's this thing where it's like, yes, you need to be ruthless about questioning, tearing down potentially the assumptions of whatever your field is, right? Or the
Best
I don't know,
practices.
the sacred cows of your field.
Yeah.
Yep. There's things that can't be questioned. But you also, if you really want to be good at this, at the same exact time, should be going back in time and exploring how the past generations did things too, because there is unquestionably stuff in there that is totally worth replicating and like holding on to, revitalizing, continuing. maybe like a new take on certain things because there's new technologies that can make things better. So I think the best people at this are not just the ones who are all in on the new stuff, right? Because that's its own kind of blind spot. And you also can't be clinging to the old stuff and like, old man shakes fist at clouds.
Totally.
You got to be both.
Yeah.
You got to be both the old man and the young whippersnapper. And this was the recent example of that for me. So for
what's that have to do with this article?
This article I pulled up, the title is Hell is a World in Which Everybody Writes Like Axios. And I 10 points for the title on this. Also, the slug I loved, this is from the New Republic, and the slug is Axios Smart Brevity Book Hell World. So, for people who don't know, I would say I come from a newsletter background. Axios, huge name in newsletter writing, and they're very famous for what they call smart brevity, which is the style in which they write all their newsletters. It's sort of like short, punchy. They bold things to make it easy to skim. They bullet stuff a lot. It's become known as like this smart brevity style. In fact, they've got a custom CMS they use to actually write it and make sure that their style is like universal.
It's like Hemingway times 10.
Exactly. And it turns out it actually builds on something Time Magazine first started. So a lot of people don't know this. I've been reading the history of Time Magazine recently. And when Time started, the first issue was 32 pages. It had 119 stories in it. Wow. And their whole thing was, we're going to update you on all the most important news, and we're going to do it in an hour. And it's going to be their whole, like, it was, hey, get Time. It's brief. Like, Time, it's brief. That was their slogan. That was their like catch out of the gate. So they were the ones who really sort of, and I'm sure maybe there was somebody before them, but like within our generation or within like our century, Time was the one that really came out of the gate with this like short, punchy style. I'm going to give you the news. I'm going to give it to you quick, and you're going to be able to skim this whole thing, right? Axios has now taken that to the next level, and the writer of this article basically says this sucks. They're like, this is like the worst. I mean, I'm gonna like gratuitously put my own spin on their words here. So who wrote this? Timothy Noah. If you're listening,
he's the No Opinion guy, right?
Is he? I don't know. Is he? I read No Opinion, but I would be, that would actually surprise me. No, I don't think he is. You know why? Because I looked at his bio and I'm like, I don't know anything that this guy has done, which was part of why I was incredulous of the opinion was like, okay, fine. You hate Axios, but Axios is like,
but what have you done?
One of the
exactly.
Yeah. And
all right, Timothy, let's see what you got.
Yeah. So, but okay, but here's his point. His point is this. And I want to say out of the gate, I agree with his underlying premise, which is that if everybody was to write the exact same way Axios, that would fucking suck. That would be, makes me nauseous just thinking of it. Right? Diversity of writing and style. That's what makes all this stuff fun. But, Timothy, it's a stretch to say, and he goes in here to kind of say, he tries to basically point out why he thinks Axios writing is the worst. And one of the things that he says is that it is actually harder to skim Axios than it would be to skim editorial writing, because Axios has been pre-skimmed. And like I said, it's like it's bulleted, bolded, like you literally, like, there's almost no way to read Axios except to skim it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a stretch. When I read that, what I see is somebody who is nervous about like the direction of an industry and is trying to hold on to the initial, or is trying to hold on to something. And here's the reality. The reality is the world needs both ways. It needs Axios. It needs full-on editorial writing. And if you write editorially well and you're able to like find your audience, you're always going to have a spot.
You're always going to have a spot. Exactly. That's why I'm not afraid at all. Like, if Wait But Why can be as popular as it is, I know people are going to read my shit.
Totally. Because it's long form. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, is that why you're saying that? Because it's super long? Like, his article was like 40,000 words long. It's also
that you said it perfectly when we brought Tim Urban, right? That's his name, Tim Urban. Yep. When we brought him up before, you say he breaks all the rules. And I've always felt with my writing, like, this doesn't fit into anything. This is a rule breaker, because I was so influenced by Copyblogger with headers and bullet points. And sometimes I'll just make something bold because I know it's at a spot where it's like, your thumb's going to stop here. And so like, I was so influenced by that mindset of understanding that people skim visually But I was also influenced by, the Neil Gaimans of the world who I've spoken to a lot of times. So, like, if you don't read the whole fucking thing, then you lose all the magic. And
Mhm.
so I'm not insecure about it anymore. I don't know if insecure is the right word. I've been finding my lane,
Yep.
and thinking to myself, like, who am I even writing to? What am I even writing about? And so eventually some maxims came to mind. One of them is I have no advice to give, only experience to share. And so, like, now I have a framework in which I can write. I know who I'm writing to for the most part. So this isn't about me. I'm just saying that there's no point in being fearful about what people create because there's no scarcity on new ideas. And in fact, the best way to advocate, let's say, for the ideas that you like the most is to share them. And so, like, so it's very counterintuitive because you would think, like, oh no, I have to defend my idea. But it's actually the opposite. If you care about your idea, the thing you have to do is share as much as you possibly can. And then
Totally.
your idea will bounce and carve itself against the erosion of all the other content that's floating out there until eventually you become what you become.
That's a good way of putting it. And also, okay, I really liked one particular part of that where you talked about not being afraid of what other people are creating,
Yeah.
or not being afraid of like the direction that you see an industry going.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I think it's kind of hard in the same way that, like, when people say, "Oh, if you want to be an investor in the stock market, you can't make emotional decisions. Like, just index all your money and never take it out." Like,
That's
that's
what I
a
do.
hard thing to do. What's that?
That's exactly what I do.
That's same here. But you know what? And it's hard at first. But then, like, you can only read so many times that, like, hey, this is, like, mathematically the best thing that you could possibly do is just index your money and leave it in forever, right? And you're either going to say, well, yeah, that's hard, and I'm going to do it. You just do it,
Yep.
or you don't. I feel like this is kind of the same way. It's like, yeah, sure, it's hard not to be afraid of the direction the industry's going. The first couple of times you see waves being made, and then at some point you just have to make a decision. Like, oh, this is actually just the thing that I just don't fear new technology, new style. Like, I choose to look for the best in it. I choose to push myself to embrace some form of it or see how my craft can grow through the availability of this new thing. I choose all those things because otherwise you're just going to be stressed out, man. We live in an age of innovation. It's never going to slow down, right?
So well said. I remember writing for the first time that I needed to be comfortable with the real possibility that the 70 grand I have in Bitcoin might disappear. And as soon as I said it, I was like, okay. And that's the absolute worst thing that's going to happen. But, like, I chose to also ride this wave of potential innovation. And maybe it won't work. But it just, when you said the anxiety or like the fear, I think you said, of you could be a newsletter writer that indexes all of your money for your entire life, right? If we're making comparisons, like, you could easily be that guy and you could make like a 9% compounding return on your writing until the day you die, right? And maybe you do that too. And maybe you could also put all of your writing in Bitcoin, or maybe you could put some of your writing in Bitcoin. Like, there's no rules. You can do whatever you want, and that was very comforting to me. And I think, again, one of the reasons why when I saw Tim Urban for the first time, and I saw, like,
Yeah.
what? Like, this isn't real. Like, you can't do this. And he's just like, sure I can. What are you talking about? I'm doing it. Like, I'm doing it right now. And it broke those casts in my mind.
That's really what it is. Realizing, and I think part of that's a time thing. You just you stick around long enough to see enough people break the rules and get away with it, and you're like, oh, actually, there is room at the table here for everybody. But I think when it comes to, like, AI specifically, this was something. It is something that I am, like, working on not fearing myself, so it's top of mind, right? Like, it's hard to look at something that has the potential to completely undermine your industry and be like, this is probably going to be fine. But I think I think it's a choice that you make, and it's a choice that I'm like working through myself. So these have all been top of mind for me. And I think it's interesting how much of this conversation came back to that concept of like looking into the thing that you fear the most and like actually just getting comfortable with it. But there's one more thing I want to say. This is not related to the bigger picture here. This is specifically related to this article that I talked about. And I don't typically like call out people that I think are wrong, right? For the most part, I prefer to just talk about things that I think are helpful and useful. But I had a little bit of an issue with this, and there's a reason for it, which is that there's a reason people write like Axios. Like there's a technical reason why the writing is that way. And like I said, I agree with this guy's point. Not everybody should do that. But for people who are thinking about newsletter writing, it's really important to understand the reason that Axios is written the way that it is. And it has to do with like the way that people are reading that content, what they're trying to get out of it. To write in the way that this guy is suggesting people write and expect somebody to read that, say, on a mobile phone, is in some cases doing a disservice to your reader. Some cases. And so it's important not just to look at the development of a style through the lens of like, do I like this or not? Or, is this a bad direction or not? But like, why is this actually happening?
Yeah.
What are the technical reasons? Like even editorial writing, there's a reason it exists, and it arose largely from the technical limitations that were put on the medium beforehand. Mm-hmm. So I think you should think through those things before you choose a point of view, because you may just be defending like, technology from 150 years ago, like the printing press, which is why editorial columns are written the way they are in some cases. Anyways,
Certainly.
all that to say, there's a reason Axios writes this way, and they do really good reporting. It's not just about their style. They actually have really good journalists on their team. You got to look at the whole picture before you just choose which direction you want to go, and then choose which direction. If you want to write long form editorial, go do that.
Yeah.
This was,
great.
Quite the wide ranging conversation, my friend.
Yeah, but it's so funny how it keeps wrapping back around. Like fundamentally what we talked about is how do you keep your nerve in an ever-changing industry that's trying to wipe you out, right? Mm-hmm. Like this guy has a way that he thinks journalism should be, and he's threatened by a way that it could be. Writers could look at growth bar SEO and think, this is what SEO should be. It can't be like this. And this happened last week too, and I'm not quite as hype about it as I was last week because I'm a little bit sleep deprived, but these conversations, like they always end up being cyclical, where it's in your work, in your business, something is always going to be coming for you. And there's a much better likelihood of success and abundance and just ease of life when you fully recognize what it is, look directly at it, and then find a way to like have a relationship with it, because it's not going anywhere. So you're not doing yourself a service by pretending that it is, right? You're not doing any good by pretending that bears can't climb trees and that hiding in the top of the tree ain't gonna save you.
That bear is just gonna come and slowly pull you out of the tree. Your fingernails scraping down the bark all the way to the ground.
Exactly. Yeah, man.
Would you believe that this is the second time I've had a conversation about bears today?
Today? No. Well, I guess I would, but
it is
unlikely.
It is legit. Second time today I've been talking about bears. So there you go, people. I guess
great place to
something's always coming for you.
Yeah.
Keep swimming. Now, this was fun, man. Anything else we got to tell people? Thanks for joining us.
Copybloggerpod.com, the free giveaway on the website. People are signing up for it, and I'm pumped. Yeah, sign up for the email list on copybloggerpod.com. Subscribe to the YouTube. I really hope people watch the videos, because a lot of times we share the screen and it's cool, but even if not, it's fine. We appreciate you following us.
Yeah, and let us know what you're I know a bunch of people listening to this are probably experimenting with all these tools right now. So show us what you got. Show us your Dolly pictures on Twitter. I'm at Damn Ethan. Tim is at Tim Stotts.
Yeah.
And show us what you're making with these things. I want to see product pages. I want to see blog posts. I've experimented with the writing thing. It's crazy. So show us what you got, and we'll see you next week.